What does this image mean? Was Kiely wearing a seatbelt? Did Kiely's vehicle enter the lake gently or at speed? In other words, was it pushed in or driven in? Also, what is the difference between the police search and the search by Adventures with Purpose? Well, it may be that if you're searching without expecting to find, well, then you don't find. Adventures with Purpose, well, it's all in the name. They're a little more committed and invested, if not a lot more. They search expecting to find, and they do find. Although there is no official confirmation, some media outlets have cautiously started using Kiely's name, but there is no doubt the vehicle retrieved was Kiely's. Adventures with Purpose also provided the make and license plate number of the vehicle. So it appears it will still take a little time for reality to shift officially for law enforcement, for the media, and perhaps for a few diehards out there who want to believe whatever they want to believe. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. Bear in mind, I'll be talking about a live that's coming up later today, when it is and what it's about at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for that. And let's get started. Now, I don't want to sound unkind to Sammy Smith, but I believe she disputed that the car that was salvaged was Kiely's, simply because law enforcement felt that they weren't sure. And I think some people are already reading something into that. Now, I've got to tell you, when you personalize this, when you put yourself in the same situation, then I think you can be a little bit more compassionate and sympathetic and caring. I know the feeling when my friend died in October last year. It's about 10 months ago now. I didn't want to believe it. I saw it actually for the first time on the news, and they didn't mention his name there, but a lot of other information. And so I was looking for his name, or I was looking for a name, and I contacted him and I checked the area and the type of bicycle. All of it was a match, but I still didn't want to believe it. Death is easy to deny when it's happening to us or someone close to us. We don't want it to be true. It's hard to accept. Even months later, it's still hard to accept. And so I think we should feel sympathy for all who knew Kiely, and especially for Kiely herself. Also for these party goers, they're getting a lot of condemnation, but can you imagine what it feels like for them? At the time that they wouldn't have this celebration, there's also this heaviness surrounding their current lives and maybe even their future, where it didn't need to be there. And I can tell you, when I was their age, we also had a kind of a graduation thing, and a classmate also died. It was also related to driving at night. And that's something I want to talk about during the live as well. Now, on the map, you can see Kiely apparently continued on a little, almost like an isthmus, a tangent of road, sort of going out, jutting out into the lake. If you think about it, it's almost the area that juts the most out, right? And it looks like she took a straight shot into the water. And if you think about it, a road going straight out to the water, you're not going to imagine that it's just going to terminate at the water. If you look at all the other roads, they go parallel and they sort of wind along the shoreline. And so Kiely, even in whatever state she was in, obviously didn't anticipate the road suddenly coming to an end. And bear in mind, water in the darkness just appears black. It doesn't necessarily reflect, and you can't necessarily see anything. It's just black. It's like a shadow. So if she was driving, I think it's likely she hit this body of water at quite a speed, and it was possibly quite a shock as well. I'm not saying she was going at maximum speed, but even if she was going 15 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour, hitting the water unexpectedly would have come as a shock. Now, what do you think it means that the Honda's left side mirror is broken but not the right? the right seems to be okay. It could be damage sustained in the effort to roll the vehicle on its right side. It could be something that the technicians, perhaps they fastened onto the mirror to right-side it. But it could also be that the vehicle sort of turned while it was hitting the water, and that part caught on the water and then broke, if that makes sense. It's also possible that the vehicle kind of turned on its side. Perhaps at the last moment, Kiely did see the water, tried to turn the vehicle, and then it flipped. And when the vehicle came to rest on the steep slope of the reservoir or of the lake, it came to rest on its side and then flipped over. Right? Does that make sense? But I do think what it means overall is that it may have hit the water quite hard, and then there's possibly some additional reinforcement to that idea. It looks like the windscreen may have been damaged as well, and if you look at the point where there's a slight inflection or deflection, a slight deformity. It's very slight in the glass. It seems to be protruding slightly outwards. It's right above the steering column. Could that be where Kiely possibly struck her head, right? And could that also be why she may have struggled to get out of the vehicle? So it's also not clear from this image where Kiely was located in the vehicle when they found her. If it was submerged and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, she may have floated to the rear of the vehicle, and that's why the tarp is where it is in this particular image. Is the front windscreen damaged at all? Now, I've hit my head into a windscreen, so I know that this is possible. We will probably have confirmation of the details later today, and we assume the divers also recovered Kiely's phone. Who knows, we might get some additional information from that. Remember the intertextualities we covered during my first and only live on this case? Which one would you say was a match for this case? I think it turned out, well, besides the intertextuality of the couple that disappeared at exactly the same time, the same day. Think about 15-year-old Nora Corrin, who, in my opinion, got lost in the Malaysian jungle for 10 days. There was also a massive search. Cries of abductor, and Nora was eventually found barely a mile from the bungalow. Very similar situation. She wasn't found by experts, dogs, police, soldiers, any official authorities either, but by amateur hikers. And it appeared some thought that she had simply gotten lost. Isn't that what happened to Kiely? And if you take the mental problem that Nora had, a failure to orient herself to some extent, isn't that what was happening to Kiely because of her being intoxicated and because of it being dark? That, in the same way, was like not a mental disorder, but a failure to have the right cognition, even if you're an intelligent person. That darkness confuses you. The official position today in the Nora Corrin case is, I think, mixed, with the parents still believing an abduction occurred while the authorities feel there's no sign of an abduction. An autopsy, you would have thought, would have settled the matter. And one wonders whether that's going to happen in this case. Are people going to still absolutely believe that there was foul play involved like they do in the Nora Corrin case? So with Kiely having been found, what are the takeouts? What do we take out of this? Well, I think you know one of them. I've said before that the abductor and trafficking scenarios are extremely popular and exciting, and it lets quite a few people off the hook, but in reality they are quite rare. What happened in this case? Something fairly obvious, as it turned out, and without all those red flags or any serious foul play. Well, that's certainly my opinion. You might say, I clearly see red flags, I clearly see foul play. And of course, if you say there isn't any, well, that's not very interesting, is it? In fact, my video saying no foul play, no one was really interested in watching. I think that says something about our approach to reality. We want it to be interesting, even if it's not believable. We want the more popular YouTubers know this, of course, as well. They know that you want an interesting story, even if it's not very likely. And so let me ask you, what's the difference between believing in fairy tales when you're 16 and believing in fairy tales when you're 60? What's the difference thinking you can drive okay while intoxicated when maybe everybody else knows that you couldn't or you shouldn't, and getting worked up over 2 weeks really over rubbish, over theories that also are very not based in reality? What's the difference between the two? Well, isn't it a little bit of ego? You think you know best, as youngsters do. You think you know reality. You think you know your reality. Perhaps you think you know reality better than you actually do. Does anyone want to acknowledge that maybe they made a mistake, that maybe they didn't think about this case very rationally? Or is that forbidden to say, Cheapers, I actually made a mistake here? Is it something that is taboo to say, wow, I actually didn't think about this the right way? Could this have any bearing on the way I think about other things? So you may think the scout mindset is silly and you don't have time for it, and you're not going to be wasting time trying to gather information. But being detached from reality means you will eventually find yourself in a nightmare, and then it all ends in tears. Someone asked, why didn't Kiely call her mom for help? It's a good question. We'll be examining it. So we're now at a time where reality sometimes shifts, where you have this reality and you might say, oh, okay, so that's not what I thought. So certain theories are dispelled or not. You will have seen how some people are still insisting there are red flags everywhere and foul play is absolutely clear. I don't see that, but I think what this shows is the way people can project themselves and their beliefs onto a set of circumstances, and even in the face of reality, refuse to accept whatever the reality is, pending official confirmations, almost like the police here as well. We don't really want to say who this is. And maybe there's not a little bit of embarrassment around this whole set of circumstances. So I also want us to start thinking about taking accountability, just that idea. You might say Kiely should have taken accountability, or Sammy, or whoever you think should have. But instead, I want to do it a different way. I don't want to point and wag our fingers at the 300 or at Kiely. But I want to see where we can take accountability for ourselves in this story, and our stubborn clinging to our opinions despite common sense to the contrary. Why do we do that? Why do we cling to our opinions the way we do, and how can we do better? So that'll be a live later today, and hopefully we'll be able to get Terry on. I have spoken to her. She was actually right there at the scene for a few days. She even took some images in profile of just how steep the embankment was. And she also drove into and out of the camp, visited the sanctuary, etc., took some amazing photos. So don't miss Reality Shift at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you guys there. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.